Hello and welcome everyone to the Tech Sharmit podcast. Today I'm here with another special guest, Anton Boyko. Anton is an accomplished information technology consultant with decades of experience in application development and a proven track record in the information technology and service industry. In addition to his consultancy work, Anton is a recognized leader in the tech community as the founder and the main speaker of Ukrainian Microsoft Azure Community. His contributions to the field have earned him the prestigious title of Microsoft Azure MVP since 2014 and Microsoft Regional Director since 2020. Anton is also a driving force behind some of the most significant Microsoft Azure conferences in Ukraine, including Azure Day and Global Azure Bootcamp, where he plays a key role as an organizer. So, in this episode, we are going to talk about his professional journey and his contribution to the Microsoft community. But before we start the discussion, I would like to thank Anton for joining us in this episode. And now I request you to please initiate the discussion by telling us something about yourself.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for inviting me. So, as you've already mentioned, my name is Anton. I based in Kiev. I work in IT for probably like 20 years already. Mostly, I'm working with, let's say, the .NET. My main background is the developer, but during my career, I worked in many professions. I worked as a developer. I worked as a DevOps. I worked as an architect. I also did a lot of things with performance testing, with security testing, and so on and so forth. And that basically gives me the ability as a consultant to communicate with all of those different groups because I may not be, let's say, a deep expert in some of the areas, but at least I understand the terminology. So that actually helps me a lot. And as you also mentioned, yes, I'm Microsoft Azure MVP since 2014, so 10 years already. And I'm also Microsoft Regional Director since 2019, so 5 years already. Yep.
Okay. So, Anton, like you have been working with Microsoft Azure since 2011, and you have
Yes.
seen the platform evolve significantly. So, what were some of
Yes.
the biggest changes you faced, or maybe the challenges you faced when transitioning to cloud-based development back then, and how have they changed over the years?
Yeah, I mean, now there are a lot of talks over the internet that starts with that AI, for example, is evolving, and a lot of people are afraid that AI will basically, replace them at their jobs. Exactly the same thing happened 15 years ago with the cloud. That was literally the same. When I was talking to a lot of people, they were afraid that the cloud computing will basically replace the system administrators because there will be no needs for them anymore. But no, it's more about how you can be more productive in your role as an expert. And if you will ask me about the challenges, well, I do believe that to some degree, this is kind of, in one hand, this is a good thing, but on the other hand, that can backfire a bit. That when Microsoft just started with their cloud, that was actually at 2009, they had the private release. They worked internally, they worked with selected partners, and then at 2 years after that, 2011, they basically started to do more public kind of activities, and that was fun because at that point I do remember I was participating in some trainings, and then I was also I run some trainings, and I showed the slide. We have like 9, 10 boxes, and I was saying like, hey guys, in 2 days over the weekends we will basically learn all of the Azure. Now I can spend weekends just by naming all of the services that are there.
Mhm.
And the biggest issue with that is that when you start working with the cloud, that variety of options, it can be really overwhelming So let's say that you are trying to do something similar. Let's say that you are trying to protect your application. You want to put some firewall in front of that application.
Mm-hmm.
So in Azure, you may have like five different options how to do that, all of them with their pros and cons. And I do believe that this is actually one of the biggest challenges right now, that to be able to make a decision, you need to be an expert, or you need to have, let's say, a connection to an expert that will basically help you to understand for your exact scenario which option is better. I also see a lot of things when someone will just, like read the white paper basically, and in the white paper it will say that, yes, okay, the best practices is to use this. And that person will say, okay, so some smart guy over the internet wrote that this is the best practice, so I will use that. And this
Okay.
is another big challenge, that it may be a best practice, but it doesn't mean that this is something that is applicable for all of the scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
Because in some cases, some of the best practices are there not because they fit all of the clients, but because they fit the majority of the clients.
Okay. Yeah.
So I actually graduated from the university in Ukraine, and I studied on the faculty which was named the Faculty of Specialized Computer Systems. And
Mm-hmm.
we had a joke because, I mean, like, why you want to learn something that is specialized of solving one task,
Mm-hmm.
while you can do something that is universal and that can basically solve all of the tasks. And we had that joke even back at my years at the university, that the actual definition of the universal solution is that this is the solution which works, let's say, which works exactly as bad for all of the scenarios.
Okay.
So this is the true definition of the universal solution. But yeah, talking kind of getting back to the point, as I was saying, the biggest challenge is that because the platform evolved and there are many options right now, it's really hard to pinpoint what will do actually the best for your specific project.
Mm-hmm.
The second challenge is that I see that people trust a lot the white papers, and they should not do that, because I mean, like, this is the good starting point, but it's definitely not something that is enough.
Yes.
And probably the last thing that I would like to highlight is that I also do see that a lot of people trust a lot in the lift and shift kind of a
Mm-hmm.
cloud migration. And well, I'm not sure whether I can share that or not, because that was actually a part of the private conversation with one of the Microsoft top persons. But
Okay.
anyway, that person shared with me in that private conversation that, according to that person's opinion, the lift and shift migration was able to um, was able to increase the business of the Microsoft Azure as the cloud, but currently it's something that draws the cloud back,
Mm-hmm.
because lift and shift migration from a technical standpoint is something that you can do very easily. You just back up all of your virtual machines, or you back up all of your physical servers, you upload that to the cloud, you restore them in the cloud, and now you are migrated. Everyone is happy,
Yes.
except the last part, because no one is happy. Because if your application or if your system was poorly designed initially, if you do the lift and shift migration, if you will change the hosting provider from, I don't know, from your local data center to Azure, or from one cloud to another, like, there is no magic. If the system was poorly architected, now it's poorly architected, but in a different cloud. That's
Yes.
that's basically it.
Okay. And as per your opinion, like how the role of developer has been changed, like with over decades of experience in application development, you have witnessed a long change throughout the journey. So how do you think the role of developer has evolved, especially with the rise of cloud technology like Azure?
Yeah, I mean, like this is actually one of the things that I've also noticed when I was working with Azure, even not only when I was working, but mostly about when I just started.
Mm-hmm.
Because initially I actually started my cloud journey with Amazon, and one of the reasons actually why I take a look at the cloud in the first place is because um, I used to have my small company when I graduated from the university. That was basically the same year as the economical crisis hit Ukraine, and that
Okay.
was hard to find a job. So I've decided to take the alternative route, and I've decided to start my own small companies, maybe do some websites for the local businesses and so on and so forth. And of course, I needed a partner. I needed to have a partner who will be able to basically solve the hosting problems for me.
Mm-hmm.
And because that was like my first company, and because at that point I was just a grad student, so I didn't have enough money. So that's why my choice of a partner was purely price driven. So
Okay.
if there are two data centers, like in Ukraine, I will just ask, okay, can you make it $1 cheaper? Yes. Okay, that's the deal. So this is this is how I choose my provider. But then I've experienced something that really affected my career, and something that I will definitely not recommend
Okay.
anyone else to experience, because at the data center that I was using to host all of those websites, they've also architected that poorly. They didn't pay attention to a lot of things when they built the data center. So one day the data center got on fire and everything was destroyed. I mean,
Okay.
like they've experienced the actual fire in the physical building, and everything was destroyed. And I said, okay, guys, so I understand that my equipment was destroyed. We can talk about that later. The most important thing for me now is to restore the operation of my clients.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Right.
said, I paid you extra for the backups. Please give me the backups so I can restore the operation, and then we can deal with everything else. And the reply from their side was, yeah, but we actually store those backups in the next room to the servers.
Okay.
which means that in one fire I lose literally everything. And now when especially someone with the development background asks me, well, but I can actually, if I need to have like a small website, I can just buy a cheap server, I can put it somewhere, I don't know, like under my bed, it will be working 24/7. I have a good internet connection at home, I have a public IP address at home that will be super cheap to host it there. Well, if it's your personal website and if the traffic is something like 15 users per month, then maybe yes. But if you are trying to build some serious application, now I can definitely say what is the difference, between the, let's say, traditional data, sorry, not traditional, the DIY data centers, like basically put your hardware under your bed, and
Yeah.
the data centers that was built by the professional team. And that was the reason for me to basically go into the cloud computing in the first place, or start to look for the partner, for the vendor that basically takes those things much more seriously rather than my previous one. And when I was first looking at the cloud, I take a look at the AWS.
Mm-hmm.
And that was good, but AWS was built still more like a traditional, I will say, kind of an approach to the cloud computing, which basically means that to be able to be successful in AWS, you need to have a mindset of, let's say, a system administrator. That's how it was when I was basically looking at that in 2009.
Okay.
But when the Azure started, they realized that they actually started 5 years after the Amazon started with their services, and they understand that that will be kind of hard for them to keep up. So that's why I do believe that somewhere basically at the top level of Microsoft, they had that meeting, and one person said that let's try to do that the other way around. Let's
Mm-hmm.
try to create a cloud that will be not, let's say, so related on the traditional way of building your infrastructure from the scratch, but something that can be used purely by the developers so they don't need to have that strong knowledge, for example, in networking, in different types of storages, and so on and so forth. Let's try to hide all of that. And basically, the first offer of Microsoft, they started to offer you a next level of abstraction, the platform as the service. Amazon was mostly focused on infrastructure at the service at that time. Azure was focused on platform at this as a service. And that was actually a really interesting thing to experience because now, as a developer, I can basically be a bit more productive. At some cases, I may not, let's say, be able to be in control of the things, but on the other hand, maybe for that project, this is not something that is needed.
Okay.
So that was the really interesting thing. And if we're talking about how that thing evolved and how the roles of the developers changed over that, well, I do see that now, let's say, more and more things that are basically used by different projects, different companies, different teams. Microsoft recognizes those and they start to create those managed services to basically, you know, give you just the endpoint, the connection string, give you the service that you can consume and build a part of your application, and then your custom code, the things that you're working on, you can build them on top of that.
Okay.
Uh, so the same thing is happening in all of the other, let's say, clouds as well. So I will not say that this is something specific for Microsoft only, but this is definitely the way how I see how all the things are moving on right now. So they are trying to take as much, let's say, standard, or I don't want to use the term redundant,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want obviously to use the word boring, but let's say they're trying to take those common tasks away
Okay.
from you, and yeah, and basically they try to help you to allocate as much time as possible to solving the actual business needs of the company that you're helping with as an engineer by creating some code. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, so let's talk bit about the Microsoft MVP because you have been a Microsoft MVP since 2014 and a regional director since 2019. So how have
Yeah.
these titles influenced your career, and what do they mean to you in practical terms or for your work and engagement with the community?
The first thing that I would like to mention here is that that was never a goal for me, and that should definitely not be the goal for anyone else to,
Hmm.
let's say, work to get that title.
Right.
Because I do believe, yeah, I do believe that this is a very bad motivation to do something just because you want to get the MVP title. Because all of those programs, all of those recognitions, they work in a way that you, as a person, you do something for the community because you have your own inner motivation. For example, I really like talking to people about some, like nerdy stuff.
Hmm.
Again, I would like to refer back to my university. I've graduated one of the actually biggest and probably one of the oldest actually technical universities in Ukraine. And in the main building, we have this big room where all the lectures are happening. And the main building now, it's mostly about, it's mostly like an exhibition as a museum, let's say,
Okay.
yes, because it's very old and so on and so forth. But the idea is that on that biggest lecture room at the main building, there is a title above the front door, and the title can be translated. That saying can be translated something like that. That together as a community much more than each of us know like individually. And this is something that basically gives me that motivation, because the reason why I'm basically participating in the community activities, the reason why I like talk to other people, share my experience with them, it's because that is something that helps me also to grow, not only as a person, but also as an expert in my field. When I
Mhm.
start talking about Azure clouds, about Azure Cloud, about other clouds to the community, it was more about, okay, I have my experience using that technology, so let me share that experience with the other people. And I have, let's say, my own list of pros and cons of every cloud, but that list, it was not, let's say, a general list. It was listed based on my experience only. And then when I was talking to those people, they were starting asking me their questions back. So someone can come and say, hey, you talked about, for example, how you use this technology to build your website, but what if I would like to build a mobile application? Will I be able to use the same technology to synchronize the data between mobile devices? Will I be successful? Will there be some pitfalls? And so on and so forth. And in that case, now I'm realizing, okay, I was never ever even considering using that for this kind of scenario.
Okay.
And this is the way how you as an expert contribute to the community, and this is the way how community help you to grow. And all of those recognition programs, it's mostly about the companies, the big companies, because I know that, okay, I'm the Microsoft MVP, but I also know that a lot of other companies have the same programs. I know that the Amazon have that program, the IBM have that program, Google
Yes.
have that program. They just named differently, but the program is basically the same. So they recognize you for your contribution, which means that you do what you do, you don't get salary from the Microsoft or IBM or something like that for the activities that you do, which means that whether they will recognize you or not, you will still be an awesome community contributor.
Correct.
So that basically means that if they don't recognize someone, it's on them. It's not because that person is not awesome. It's mostly because they are just unaware that that awesome person exists.
Yes, I
Yeah.
completely agree with you on this. Like we should not always look on the those titles and the perks that is provided by the organization under this program. We should always focus on the contribution part, like how we are contributing, how we are giving back to the IT community, or maybe for any community. So yeah, that's something that everyone should focus on.
Yeah, and I don't want to make a statement that MVP means that I'm the smartest person when it comes to my technology, my favorite technology. I am not saying that I'm the biggest expert in the world when it comes to Microsoft Azure, but on the same time, there are two different things. The first thing is to be an expert, which is already good. But the other thing is that you're an expert, but you're also an active member of the community, which means that you're not only affecting your own life, you're also affecting the life of other people. You're helping them to grow, and therefore, because they are growing, they're also kind of lift you up a bit.
Correct. Yes. Okay, so my next question is like you are the founder and the main speaker of the Ukrainian Microsoft Azure community. So can you share some insight into how this community has built and what impact it has had on the local tech ecosystem?
Yeah, this is a really good question because how it was built? It was built because I was looking for someone to talk to about Microsoft Azure.
Hmm.
I've attended a few events at the local Microsoft office, and then I basically approached to the guy from Microsoft and I was asking, "Hey, I'm looking for the community. I'm looking for someone to speak about all that stuff. Can you point me in their direction?" And that guy, he basically, like lowered his eyes and he said, well, technically we don't have any local communities here in Ukraine. And I will say, okay, then I will try to fix that. And I was just basically talking to my friends. I just invited them to came over. Microsoft supported us with basically providing us with the facility, providing us with some, pizzas and sandwiches and stuff so we can eat something while we're talking about those technologies. And on the first community meetup in Ukraine, we had myself and four other people.
Okay.
So at the first meetup, it was only five attendees, including the speaker. And yeah, the community was quite small, but after that, we, as you mentioned already, established two annual conferences. We have the Global Azure Bootcamp, and the Global Azure Bootcamp is not the local thing in Ukraine because kind of the name global implies that this is the worldwide event.
Worldwide, yeah.
And the idea is that all of the Azure practitioners worldwide and the same day they gather in their basically local communities and they do some cool stuff related to Azure. They, I don't know, have some workshops, have some lectures, and so on and so forth. And in that way, we established the uh, global Azure Bootcamp, let's say Ukrainian chapter. And that conference, we see it as more like a conference for, let's say, junior practitioners.
Mm-hmm.
And at peak, we had approximately like 600 attendees at that conference.
Okay.
And the other conference, the Azure Day conference, this is something that I've established myself, and I also help to establish the same conference in the nearby countries
Mm-hmm.
because I've invited a lot of guys, a lot of experts from the nearby countries to visit Ukraine and to talk on Azure Day conference, and they were so excited about this awesome event that they've then asked for my help to do the same, but in their countries.
Okay.
And that was really awesome collaboration. And for Azure Day at peak, we had around 400 attendees at our biggest conference. And Azure Day, we see that mostly as, let's say, as an event for the experienced practitioners. And if I'm talking about how that affected the local ecosystem, I do believe that here it also makes sense to say that to some degree, Ukrainian ecosystem may look like maybe a bit as an Indian IT ecosystem, in a
Okay.
way that we have a lot of service companies that are providing the outsourcing services, mostly to European or US clients.
Mm-hmm.
And also we have another part which works purely on the local market. And unfortunately, those basically two, let's say, two hemispheres of the Ukrainian IT, they are a bit disconnected. One of the reasons why they are a bit disconnected is because we have some laws and regulations that prohibits you to store the data of the Ukrainian citizens in the data center that is physically outside Ukraine. So all of the personal data of the Ukrainian citizens must be stored physically within the boundaries of Ukraine. To be honest, that regulation was lifted when the full-scale war started in Ukraine. That regulation was lifted, and our government allowed our businesses to basically move the data to European countries because, well, if if they did not allow that, then that we will have the same situation as I was describing at the beginning with the fire, because if the bomb will land on the data center, then all of the data get destroyed in one day. So that's why now it's a bit of a different story. But at that time, the regulation was like that. So that's why all of those contributions, all of those activities, they mostly affected the service companies. And I'm happy because the community actually helped us to establish a really strong Azure practices in few big companies. So the guys there were invited me over to basically deliver some more deep dive trainings to their internal team, show them the ropes, talk about pros and cons, and so on and so forth. And yeah, I'm really proud that this was one of the, let's say, probably most significant contributions in the local Ukrainian IT that I helped to establish some strong Azure practices in some of our service companies.
Okay, yeah, you are really doing a good contribution to Ukrainian community, especially for the IT industry, because the work you are doing is really very inspiring, not only for those who are expert in this community, but also for those who are just about to start their career for this IT industry. So yeah, and like there are many things on which we can discuss right now, but just because of the limitation of time, I would like to ask my last question, and which is related to your hobbies. So, what hobbies or interests do you pursue outside your professional life that helps you to stay motivated and inspired?
Well, I do have a lot of them. I consider myself a geek, so that's why basically writing code is one of the hobbies, and I
Yeah.
do that also for fun. But I do believe this is pretty much everyone in the industry can tell about himself, so that's why I will talk about another big hobby of mine. I'm actually a big fan of the board games.
Okay.
So I do have a lot of board games. I do have probably more than 100 different titles. I've selected them for my taste mostly, and I like that because back in the days that was the really good opportunity for me to invite my friends to come over to my house, basically play some board games and also, like socialize, talk about something. And by the way, we're talking, I just need to remove this backpack. And one of the things that I've recently get in terms of the board games, I will not show the box, but I will show the posters. So
Okay.
those are the posters for the Heroes of Might and Magic, the board game that there used to be a campaign on the Kickstarter. I supported that campaign. They sent me a huge box, which is more than 10 kilos. So the board game is quite heavy. And
Okay.
also as a gift, they sent me some cool posters.
Posters. Yeah.
So yeah, I really like board games. And when I came to, let's say, to a friend's house, I usually bring a board game with me. I always made a joke that the first board game is for free. So I
Mhm.
usually give them the first board game as a gift. But I also, yeah, but I also then say that, it's very easy to get addicted because that hobby is so awesome. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So thank you so much, Anton, for joining us in this podcast and for sharing a lot of information related to IT industry and Microsoft Azure community. It's really very beneficial for all of us, like those who wanted to make their career in this specific domain. So thank you once again for joining.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you.